The rain had been falling since dawn, turning the narrow street into a ribbon of mud and broken reflections. People hurried past with collars up and eyes down, eager to escape the cold. No one noticed the small puppy at first, thin, trembling, his fur matted with dirt and rainwater. He stood near a cracked sidewalk drain, paws slipping, eyes darting at every passing shadow. Hunger gnawed at his belly, but fear pressed even harder. He had been alone since morning, since the loud noise, since the hands that once held him were suddenly gone. When the man appeared, the puppy didn't bark or run. He simply watched. The man looked tired, shoulders slumped, briefcase heavy in his hand and heavier thoughts on his mind. He had lost his job that morning, his future suddenly uncertain. As he walked, his foot brushed against something soft. He stopped, startled, and looked down. Two dark, pleading eyes stared back at him. The puppy gathered what little strength he had and limped forward. One paw was swollen, bleeding slightly where glass had cut it. He didn't whine loudly. Instead, he let out a soft, broken sound, almost like a whisper. Then, as if understanding that words wouldn't work, he lifted his injured paw and placed it gently on the man's shoe. Something inside the man cracked. He crouched slowly, rain soaking his coat, and studied the puppy's face. There was pain there, yes, but also trust. A dangerous thing to give so freely. "Hey, little guy," he murmured, though his voice shook more than he expected. He reached out, and the puppy didn't flinch. That was all it took. The man wrapped the puppy in his coat and carried him to the nearest shelter he could find, his own small apartment. The place was barely furnished, boxes still stacked from a move he'd never finished unpacking. He cleaned the wound carefully, hands gentle despite his own shaking. The puppy watched him the entire time, tail thumping weakly against the floor. That night, the puppy slept curled against the man's chest, warm and breathing, alive. The man stared at the ceiling long after, listening to that small heartbeat, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time, needed. Morning brought sunlight and a soft whine. The puppy stood by the door, tail wagging now, eyes brighter. The man laughed for the first time in weeks. He named him Hope without quite knowing why. Days passed. Hope healed quickly, energy returning in bursts of clumsy joy. The man searched for work, rejection emails piling up, savings thinning. Some nights, he wondered if he'd made a mistake taking on responsibility he could barely afford. But every time doubt crept in, Hope was there, nose nudging his hand, body pressed close, silent reassurance that he wasn't alone. One afternoon, as the man walked Hope through a nearby park, an older woman stopped abruptly. Her hand flew to her mouth as she stared at the puppy. Tears filled her eyes. She knelt, calling a name the puppy instantly recognized. Hope bolted forward, tail a blur, licking her face with wild excitement. The story spilled out between sobs. The puppy had gone missing during a storm weeks ago. He was part of a therapy dog training program, meant to help children in trauma wards. They had searched everywhere, fearing the worst. The man's chest tightened. He looked at Hope, really looked at him, at the calm focus beneath the playfulness, the way he seemed to understand pain instinctively. This puppy hadn't just begged for help. He had been searching for someone who needed him, just as much as he needed saving. When the woman thanked him, offering a reward, the man shook his head. Watching Hope walk away hurt more than he expected. But as he turned to leave, she stopped him again. The program was expanding. They needed handlers, people with empathy, patience, and heart. Hope barked once, sharp and certain, then ran back to the man and sat at his feet. That was the ending no one expected. The man didn't just save a puppy that day. The puppy saved him right back. The paperwork took weeks, but every day brought the man and Hope closer to a future neither of them had imagined. Training sessions began early in the mornings at the center, where the smell of disinfectant mixed with warm coffee and quiet determination. Hope walked proudly at the man's side, as if he understood this was important work. The trainers noticed immediately how naturally they moved together. The puppy responded to the man's voice with instant focus, eyes locked, tail steady. It wasn't forced obedience, it was trust. At first, the man doubted himself. He worried he wasn't good enough, that his mistakes would hold Hope back. But Hope never judged. When the man's voice trembled, Hope leaned closer. When frustration tightened his hands, Hope placed his head gently on the man's knee, grounding him. Slowly, confidence replaced fear. The trainers smiled knowingly. The best teams were always formed through shared healing. Their first visit to the children's hospital arrived sooner than expected. The man's hands shook as he clipped Hope's vest in place. The words, "therapy dog in training," felt heavier than any job title he'd ever held. The hospital hallway was quiet, the kind of quiet filled with unspoken worry. Hope sensed it immediately, walking slower, softer, as if the air itself asked for gentleness. In the first room sat a little boy with tired eyes in a too big hospital gown. Tubes surrounded him, machines humming softly. The boy barely looked up when the man spoke, but the moment Hope stepped forward and rested his chin on the bed, everything changed. A small hand reached out. Fingers curled into fur. A smile appeared, fragile, but real. Hope stayed perfectly still, breathing slow, letting the child lead. The man felt his chest tighten as he watched laughter replace fear, even if only for a moment. Nurses paused in the doorway, some wiping their eyes. In that room, time seemed to soften. Room after room, Hope worked quietly, instinctively. He sensed sadness before words were spoken, leaned into pain without fear, and offered comfort without expectation. The man realized something profound. Hope wasn't following commands. He was following his heart. One evening, after a long day, the man collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion pulling him down. Doubt returned like a shadow. Was this really enough? Could he build a life from this fragile beginning? As if answering him, Hope climbed onto his chest and placed a paw over his heart, just as he had on that rainy street. The memory hit hard. The man closed his eyes, breathing through the weight of it all, and felt steady again. Weeks turned into months. Certification day arrived with quiet excitement. When Hope passed his final evaluation, the trainers applauded, and the man felt tears he didn't bother hiding. He had failed at so many things before, but this mattered. Their bond deepened beyond work. Morning runs in the park, shared meals, silent evenings filled with understanding. The man began speaking to others again, smiling more, believing more. Hope wasn't just a dog. He was a bridge, back to the world, back to purpose. Then one afternoon, during a routine visit, something unexpected happened. Hope suddenly stopped outside a hospital room, refusing to move. His body stiffened, ears alert, eyes fixed on the door. The man felt a chill. This wasn't distraction. This was instinct. Inside was a teenage girl sitting alone, face turned toward the window. The moment Hope entered, he went straight to her, pressing his head against her leg and staying there, unmoving. She broke down, tears spilling freely. Between sobs, she confessed she hadn't spoken to anyone all day, hadn't planned to speak again at all. Staff intervened quickly. Later, a doctor quietly told the man that Hope's timing had been critical. That girl had been moments away from making a choice she couldn't take back. That night, walking home under a clear sky, the man understood the truth behind the ending everyone said they wouldn't believe. Hope hadn't begged for help because he was weak. He had begged because he was meant to save lives, and he needed the right human beside him to do it. The news of what happened at the hospital spread quietly at first, carried in hushed conversations between nurses and doctors, then slowly making its way through the therapy program. No one turned it into a headline, but everyone felt it. The man felt it too, deep in his chest, a mixture of pride and fear. He began to realize that Hope's instincts were more than comfort, they were responsibility. Lives could shift because of a single moment, a single touch, a single choice to listen. With that understanding came pressure. The man worried constantly about missing signs, about failing to read Hope correctly. Some nights, sleep escaped him as he replayed every visit in his mind. Yet each morning, Hope greeted him with the same calm certainty, tail wagging, eyes clear. It was as if the dog carried the weight so the man didn't have to. They were invited to expand their visits beyond the children's ward, rehabilitation centers, trauma units, even emergency waiting rooms. In one such waiting room, they met a woman whose hands shook uncontrollably as she waited for news about her husband. Hope approached slowly and rested his head against her knee. She grabbed his fur like a lifeline, sobbing into it, her breath slowly evening out. Later, she thanked the man with a smile filled with exhausted gratitude. The man realized then that healing didn't always mean fixing something. Sometimes it just meant staying. Life outside the hospital changed too. The man was offered a permanent position with the therapy organization, steady income paired with meaningful work. The job didn't erase his past struggles, but it gave them purpose. His apartment felt warmer now, filled with laughter, dog toys scattered across the floor, and an unspoken understanding that neither of them was alone anymore. Then came the call that shook everything. A multi-vehicle accident had flooded the emergency ward. Families crowded the halls, fear thick in the air. The staff asked if Hope could come immediately. The man hesitated only for a second before grabbing the vest and leash. The hospital was chaos when they arrived. Hope moved differently here, focused, grounded, almost solemn. He guided the man through the crowd, stopping beside a young boy sitting alone against a wall, knees pulled to his chest. The child hadn't cried, his silence was worse. Hope lay beside him, pressing close. Slowly, the boy leaned in. Words came later, about his parents, about not knowing if they were alive. Nurses took over, but the boy didn't let go of Hope until he had to. Hours later, as the chaos eased, exhaustion hit the man hard. He stepped outside for air, sitting on the curb with Hope beside him. His hands trembled now, the weight finally catching up. For the first time since they met, he felt afraid, not of failing, but of losing Hope someday. The thought hollowed him. As if sensing it, Hope nudged his hand, eyes steady, presence firm. The man breathed deeply, grounding himself the way Hope had taught him without words. He understood then that love always carried risk, but it was worth it. Time moved forward. Their story reached others, inspiring more people to volunteer, to train, to open their hearts. The man began speaking at small events, telling the simple truth: healing was a shared journey. He never claimed to be a hero. He always pointed to hope. Years later, on another rainy morning much like the first, the man and Hope walked the same street where they had met. Hope's fur was grayer now, his steps slower but confident. They stopped near the old drain, water rushing past. The man knelt and placed his hand on Hope's chest, feeling the steady heartbeat that had once saved his own. People passed by, unaware of the lives changed because of this quiet partnership. The man smiled, not because everything had been perfect, but because it had been meaningful. The ending everyone said they wouldn't believe wasn't sudden or dramatic. It was simple. A puppy begged for help and found a human who listened. Together, they learned that sometimes salvation comes on four legs, and sometimes, it holds a leash too.